How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the corner. I'm the DM as always, and today we have another one from Nice Gaming. Now, I followed him for quite a while, as some of you may know, and I always really like his takes. Generally speaking, they are very well thought out takes, and they aren't ones that I personally feel are like that controversial, though I could see how some might think of it as such. But in this one, he talks about a problem with PvP and MMOs. And now I've already seen the video, and that's the reason why I'm actually making this one, is because I have a few opinions about it that don't necessarily disagree with him. Um, but they're not necessarily ones that agree either. They're just kind of like in the middle ground, kind of neutral. Um, and I wanted to talk about this because this is a topic that I've thought about occasionally as well. As some of you may know, I play Final Fantasy 14, and in that game, PvP is kind of like side content. There is no PvP in the world itself. It's all relegated to specific queues that you have to go into. So it's very much just optional content that the vast majority of the player base just doesn't even interact with. Um, and yet, in spite of that, they still hold PvP tournaments. The Square Enix themselves still hold PvP tournaments for the game, official ones. Um, and I also come from a background of games from the 90s, like a game called Ashen Empires, formerly known as Dransec, which has open world PvP as or had anyways, and has a PvP server as well as a PvE server. And so I've played a lot of different games that have both PvE focus as well as a PvP focus. And so I have some opinions and some takes that I think can add to this sort of discussion. And so that's why I'm making this video.
Hello, gamers. It's nice, and I hope everyone's still holding out hope for the MMORPG genre is having a nice day. Today, I want to get a discussion going around player versus player interactions in MMOs, the psychological observations of the MMO player when it comes to PvP, and the market or lack thereof for a hardcore PvP MMO. I want to keep this one as short as possible, but if you like these sort of discussions, please consider subscribing for more. The MMORPG genre has been around for quite some time and stands for Massive Multiplayer Online Role Playing Game. Believe it or not, it's not among the most popular genres, as the genre in itself isn't the most casual despite players varying from hardcore to casual levels. I haven't played even close to as many different MMOs as some of my peers, but I know enough to know that the MMORPG genre, more times than not, focuses on the PvE/RPG side of things rather than focusing on PvP. PvE being player versus environment or AI/NPCs, and obviously PvP being player versus player.
Just so people are aware, there's also PVM, which is the exact same as PvE. It's just some people prefer that term because it's player versus monster, uh, rather than environment. But I noticed he hadn't pointed that out in the video, and I just wanted to point that out. It's not a issue or anything. I just wanted to.
Obviously, there is the outlier of
Small
hardcore
distinction.
PvP focused MMOs, but more on those later. PvE is the obvious choice of focus as it will appeal to a larger audience. Not everyone enjoys PvP, but most games we've played have a PvE focus for the most part. Even if the game had PvP and that was your focus, there was typically a story mode, questline, campaign, or something like that which existed. Most game developers know they need casuals or PvE focused players in order to retain a steady population, especially in the niche MMORPG genre. While the niche of MMO PvP exists in the already niche MMORPG genre, it's not exactly the mass appeal most think it is. And it's okay to admit that. I tell you that as someone who has literally built their content creation around MMO PvP. I love MMO PvP. I love fighting against the odds and just engaging with other players. A lot of you know me from Outnumbered PvP, 1vx, etc., etc. Win or lose, you say GG. You respawn and then you go try again. However, not everyone has that mindset like me and maybe even you. There is a loud vocal majority who really dislike PvP, and even more whom hate involuntary PvP. PvP you don't necessarily have to sign up or quote consent to via entering a PvP queue, a PvP zone, an instance, or signing up for a PvP server. And this is okay, this is fine. It's important to understand that everyone has their own gaming preferences, their own likes and dislikes and goals when they log into a video game or when they choose to purchase a video game. So, before we do a dive into the psychology of MMOs, I want to further elaborate on these involuntary PvP games, or as they are better known as, hardcore PvP MMOs.
So, just something I want to touch on here is the psychology behind PvP just in general. It kind of varies based off of what type of PvP there is. There is, since World of Warcraft is on, I'll use that as the first example. There is the voluntary world PvP that you flag yourself for, such as the war mode in World of Warcraft, where you are allowed to be attacked and you can attack other players at the same time. Then there is the involuntary PvP, such as Ashes of Creation, um, or the aforementioned PvP servers in various games, where PvP is always on, and no matter what, you can be attacked and can attack other players. Um, and then there are the non PvP servers, or just the PvE slash PvM uh, uh, games like Final Fantasy 14, for example, which might have PvP, but it's relegated to like side content, and you have to purposefully kind of go out of your way to engage with that type of content. Um, these three different modes have three entirely different player bases. The ones where you can flag yourself for PvP, those types of players have a different mindset towards PvP as a whole than those that you have to go out of your way to PvP, or even those that you always have PvP on. Same goes for the other two. They are completely different mindsets for different players as to how they look at that kind of content, how they engage with that content, and how they view the reward structure for that content. And reward structure is something I'll touch on in a little bit, but that is very important because the reward structure can turn someone who enjoys always on PvP. They can make that person, if it's a lackluster reward system or reward progression, it can turn those kind of players into toggle PvP players, or even just I don't want to engage with the system at all type of players.
These MMOs unapologetically have their target audience and their own niche. Concepts of risk versus reward, full loot, and open world PvP attract their thrill seeking adventurers. However, it doesn't exactly translate into big money or population for the developers of these projects. Telling players they can lose everything or a percentage of things upon death can often harm the new player experience and maybe even turn people off from even giving your game a try.
I can agree with this in wholeheartedly. Albion Online, he's shown a few clips from the game already, but Albion Online is a game that, while I have tried the thought of progressing my character really far, or progressing my character and then just being out in the world, because I am typically a solo player in MMOs. That is to say, I don't necessarily engage with other players actively. Um, Finding myself simply outnumbered at some point, killed, and then have some of or all of the stuff that I've worked hard for as a solo player, just taken because these other people decided they wanted it, it has turned me off from the game. It's the primary reason why I don't play Albion Online, is because the high level content is pretty much always mandatory PvP. There's no real way to engage with that content without being forced into PvP, and it's one reason why, one primary reason why I haven't personally checked out Ashes of Creation, is because while I understand that the intent of the game is the always online or always active PvP, that in itself is another reason why I don't personally play the game or want to play the game. Um, because while they do have systems in place to deter killing players who are not choosing to engage with that system, I still do not like having the chance of just being killed and having things that I've worked for, whether it just be XP, items, etc., lost because someone else decided they just want to kill me. That kind of system has deterred me from wanting to play it.
Those of you who follow my channel closely know that I often cover upcoming MMO Ashes of Creation, which is still in its early alpha state. I recently posted a video on node sieges in this game. It's an incoming feature which would see nodes/towns that players built up and invested in completely destroyed and reset. This would cause players to lose citizenship, housing, and their hard-earned materials, and the artisan buildings that players invested into for the whole server. An example of the game building the world through PvE and changing it through PvP.
So this right here is an example of what I would say is a healthy balance between PvE and PvP in a game that is PvP focused, PvP centric, which is exactly what Ashes of Creation is. It's a PvP centric, PvP focused game, um, with PvE elements, right? As opposed to like 14, which is a PvE focused game with PvP elements, right? Which is like sideline, you have to go and engage, blah blah blah. In this way, Ashes of Creation is a well balanced PvP game.
As I predicted, many players in the comments weren't aware of the system or expressed dissatisfaction with it. While MMO Ashes of Creation may not be considered a hardcore MMO by most per se, this serves as a good example of players not favoring risk versus reward when PvP is involved. This doesn't mean gamers don't like high difficulty or challenges or even need hand-holding. I feel the success of Elden Ring is a good testament to this, even though it's not an MMORPG, obviously. But if we take a look at some hardcore PvP games who are unapologetically who they are, such as, I don't know, Mortal Online 2, we'll see that most hardcore PvP focused MMOs don't necessarily find success. Of course, you could discuss other issues with the title as the reason it struggles to hit 1K concurrent players, but for the players who play it, they are having a good time enjoying themselves in a social sandbox MMORPG. I rarely tune into a stream of Mortal Online 2 where the person isn't enjoying themselves, and honestly, the game looks fun and I'm hoping to give it a try soon. This is despite the game essentially being full loot PvP.
So the bigger overall reasoning for this, right, where players seem to be less interested in like these full loop PvP games or these heavily PvP focused games, the biggest reason for it is how MMOs are viewed nowadays. So, back when I was a kid, playing Dransec, and when it later was renamed to Ashen Empires, these games, and even World of Warcraft Classic, the original launch of World of Warcraft, these MMOs were designed with a different mindset entirely to how MMOs nowadays are designed. And if you look at these games like Mortal Online, the design philosophy is very, very reminiscent of these older games, of these older titles. MMOs back 20, 30 years ago were designed with the idea that they were social games rather than or really just social environments, really, rather than games. They were the social media of the 90s and early 2000s. These were games that were designed before things like Ventrilo, TeamSpeak, Discord, Skype, before any of these were really a thing, before they were really popular. These were how you communicated with friends after you got off of work, after you got out of school, right? And so that's why when you look at these games, a lot of them they were lengthy and grindy, and people didn't mind the length and grind because they weren't really played with the idea or with the care of having to grind for things, because they were primarily used as a platform to communicate, to socialize, right? Conversely, MMOs nowadays are not designed with this philosophy in mind. MMOs nowadays are designed as more of a transitionary aspect between talking with friends, because nowadays you can just hop on Skype, you can call them up on your phone. You can't really see it now because my phone is black, but they are designed for entertainment nowadays as opposed to a social environment. And so for these full scale hardcore MMOs that are or PvP MMOs, um players don't want to spend hours playing these games only to have their progress nullified within 5 minutes because someone decided to come up to them with a squad of 10 to 15 people, kill them, and take all their stuff. That's the primary reason, and I will die on this hill. That is the primary reason why players do not in mass enjoy these kind of games.
While it may be fun for some, having PvP and PvE being able to happen simultaneously isn't a good thing to some people. A lot of people don't like PvP and PvE being sort of intertwined. They really want it as separate systems. People often don't like the idea that they can be PK'd at any time while exploring, fighting NPCs, or role playing in the back of a player made brothel. These games usually have a system like Mortal Online 2 does with the criminal system, or how Ashes of Creation has with the corruption system, to deter meaningless PvP and limit the potential of the game becoming a gank box. However, one must ask, is this sustainable, being that most hardcore PvP MMOs, aside from maybe like an Albion and a few others, suffer this population trend where they hold a small but consistent player base with no growth appeal, or just flat out die due to griefing or potential non-consensual PvP, not being able to rope players in and not being able to retain the new players that do come in. But why? Do MMO players hate challenges? Do they not want PvP because of the challenge? Do they not yearn for competition? I don't think this is the case, because why are MMO players willing to do in-game dungeons and difficult trials and take on the toughest world bosses with a great attitude and continue trying again and again? Why is there such a huge difference dying to a character being controlled by another human somewhere out there in the world, and dying to Mardon, the crystal troll of Valeria, an NPC randomly placed in the world? And this is where we'll discuss the psychology of PvP MMOs.
Just real quick and short before I let him continue, because I do want to talk on this a lot. Most of that mentality comes from players wanting control, right? They cannot control when a player decides that they want to come and kill them randomly, right? Even in a game like World of Warcraft, where even if you die, you just hit respawn, you don't really lose anything, right? Versus an NPC where you know their mechanics, you know exactly when they're going to do stuff, or at least you can learn when they're going to do stuff. You can learn at what HP thresholds they perform certain actions. You know that their opening is two basic auto attacks into a raid wide AoE damage, right? Into a tank buster, right? You know that kind of mechanic. You know that thing is going to come, and you know exactly the exact specific timing of each and every single one of those. You know how long their cast times are, all that. Versus a player who you could fight them 100,000 times, and each time could be a completely different opener. They could do completely different things at completely different times with completely different cast speeds and completely different HP, completely different everything, completely different damage output, right? That's the long and short of it.
Why is it that dying to another player triggers that frustration in us, whereas dying in a PvE situation like the Call of Duty campaign mode just lets you click respawn typically without even an ounce of frustration coming across you? If Chainsmoker XX69420XX quickscopes you in Call of Duty and teabags you afterwards, it'll prompt frustration, hate mail, you turn red, get frustrated, put on the mic, and may even throw your controller or keyboard across the room. As a PvP focused player, I've seen it all. Even when I'm not even toxic, just getting hate mail from just killing someone in PvP. You kill a player, you get hate mail, teabagged, doxed, and reported because you triggered something, just something in that player's psyche when you previously killed them earlier that day. They may have even taken it personal as that's their character that they've been role playing with, that they've grown an attachment with. In RPGs, especially single player ones, we're made out to be the hero, the chosen one, the one who saves the day. So when you finish the Elder Scrolls Online main campaign and save all of Tamriel just for me to 1v3 you and your friends, it causes some immersion breaking frustration. You were supposed to be the chosen one, right? Then there's the psychological downer of not being in control and feeling you didn't even have a chance. That person just had better gear than me. That player's just been playing longer than me. His class was just better. Stuff like this. MMOs will never be balanced as characters have different classes, armor, weapons, stats, experience levels, and more. But the goal for MMO PvP is to constantly strive to be as possibly balanced as it could be with the tools given, even though it'll never achieve true balance. No matter how much you try, though, MMOs will not be perfectly balanced, nor will a lot of aspects of online player versus player gaming ever be balanced.
No, and this is something that people have to sort of understand. And this comes again with the mentalities, with the state of someone's thought process that I was mentioning earlier versus people who enjoy involuntary PvP, people who enjoy toggle PvP, and people who just enjoy only PvE and don't want to associate with PvP, right? So, in PvP, or sorry, in PvE, going back to the aspect of control, right? If you go into a raid, let's take Final Fantasy 14 for example. If you go into one of their 8-man trials, even their Savage, highest difficulty ones, right, with 8 people, um, typically speaking, those 8 people are people you either know or have some level of trust built up between you, right? Like you can trust the healers to be able to perform their job adequately. You can trust the DPS to be able to perform there. You can trust the tanks to be able to perform, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So you have this level of trust, right? And within that trust, you gain a bit of control, right? Especially amongst friends, where you can control specific timings of attacks. You can control where things are pointed. You can control how bosses act. You can control who the bosses attack, right? Um, in PvP, as Nice puts it, he comes from a background in Elder Scrolls where he used to do a series where he would 1v3 people, right? And you could even see it in the clips he was showing where he was killing multiple players all by himself. And just looking at the footage, you would be forgiven for thinking that he makes it look easy, right? Like, oh, look at how easy he just 1v3s these people. It doesn't even look like he's struggling. His health really never even drops into like a critically um, dangerous territory, right? And you know for a fact that some of these people are going to be very upset because it's like, well, how is this one person killing all three of us? How is it that we are not able to control the flow of battle and just kill this person? It gets frustrating because you have this strategy that you've built up. You have these skills in this build that you have made. You've probably looked at a guide that's promised, oh, this is the easiest PvP build in the game, and you'll be able to take on anyone, right? And then you get 1v3'd, and you're left thinking, well, how did he do this? This is unbalanced. Like Nice said, clearly they just had better gear. They must have just had better gear. They have more experience. You start making all of these excuses, and in reality, some of it, sure, some of those excuses might be true, but at the same time, the reality is sometimes things just can't be balanced properly. Um, you will see a constant juggling act. That's why almost every balance patch that comes out in any MMO has all these massive changes to different skills, different abilities, different classes, different equipment. You have brand new equipment constantly coming out with different stats and different things, different effects that happen. You have all these different aspects that undergo changes constantly over and over and over and over again in every single MMO. There's not a single MMO that doesn't have something like this done. It's part of the reason why in 14 the PvP is separated in such an enormous way that when you go into a PvP area, your entire hotbar changes. The skills you do, the damage that they do, the skills you have access to, the way even limit breaks work is completely different. And when you look at the patch notes, there are patch notes for PvE, and then there are patch notes for PvP, where the PvP actions undergo changes that are completely different to the PvE actions. The way the combo system works is completely different from the PvP to the PvE. And they've done this to try and make it so that they can make changes to PvP without making changes to PvE, and vice versa.
It's not like a fighter where you can just say, "Oh, misread that input," or "they just outplayed me," or something like that. It's just something different with MMO PvP. So developers, even if PvP friendly, must walk a fine line when introducing and focusing on their PvP aspect. Those of you who have been around for a while may remember
Speaking of that, just very briefly, even in fighters, balance changes are happening. And that's again where I go to the point where there really isn't any game that has PvP that doesn't undergo changes, balance changes constantly in every single patch. Not a single game with PvP.
when I mained MMO New World. Well, I plan to return and do an updated review of the title. I was a PvP main, so when I saw that they recently introduced PvP servers with mandatory open world PvP, well, I was excited. However, even as someone who really likes New World's open world PvP, I knew this mandatory flagging after level 15 for PvP was gonna end up going one obvious way.
There's another YouTuber called Josh Strife says that he put it in a very good way where all games have quit moments, where the player is going to hit a wall, they're going to encounter something that they really dislike, and it's going to cause them to quit.
Listen.
Go inside and I won't do your ass. Hey, you heard me warn him. You heard me.
That right there is a quit moment. You're a level 15. This guy is max level. You're all minding your own business, and all of a sudden he comes up and kills you. And takes your stuff. This right here is a quit moment. This will make your players quit, and it's one of the biggest reasons why a lot of these PvP focused games die.
We just witnessed the griefing of griefing. Let's follow Jasmine. Jasmine is toxic.
So what he just said there, like the griefing of griefing, Ashen Empires, even on their PvP servers, griefing is something that can cause players to quit. And I have personally gotten people banned because of this exact scenario of a max level player going and killing a very low level player simply because they can.
He's max level, just sitting in the starter area griefing people. We're gonna stalk him.
Uh-oh, Butterberry. Don't run from this pig. Don't run from this pig. Don't run from this pig.
People think Ash is a creation is hardcore? Excuse me? Oh. He doesn't notice I'm stalking. Oh, 265s! You got somebody your level. Oh, you finally found somebody your level. You died. Karma. Oh, I love the karma. He wasn't talking shit after that.
Now, you'll notice the moment he ran into a 65, he shut the fuck up immediately and then got killed. And the reason why is because this player is not playing this game for PvP. He's playing it to grief people. That is the only reason he is playing.
So yeah, New World seasonal PvP realm sought to get back to its original design of open world PvP before it was pressured by consumers to change, but it became a griefing fest where max level players returned to the starting zone after leveling just to bully new players and even camp the quest turn-in locations of low-level story missions. Obviously, there's a difference between PvP and griefing, but if this was your first introduction to New World, which it was for a lot of players, you may not be motivated to help player retention numbers. I truly believe it's just a psychological thing when it comes to MMO PvP.
And many people that play these hardcore MMOs play them with the intent of making other people quit the game. By being like that dominant in the game that other people are going to quit in order to, because they're just getting fucking destroyed.
If you spend hours and hours grinding dungeons and finally get the ultimate sword drop and then another player kills you and takes it, you will become extremely demotivated and not really feel like getting it again. But the player that killed you is now super happy he got a rare sword. One player is extremely saddened, another is elated.
Happy
Unfortunately
vampires.
for player retention, this has been shown to lead to the defeated player quitting and the player base dropping. Now you might be saying the defeated player needs to just toughen up and go and grind again, but player base drops over time have shown the majority of gamers are not fans of hardcore design like this.
In short, even as a MMO PvP
Precisely.
main, I can see the frustrations of PvE mains or even just players who want to keep their PvE and PvP separate. While for me, I love PvX, or rather the combination of PvE and PvP together, the frustration of dying to a player versus dying to AI is just for some reason an unavoidable trigger in gaming, and it elicits different responses from us. And when this occurs in the niche genre of MMOs, it can frustrate your whole player base. As fun as open world MMO PvP is, and as much as, in my opinion, it's the most fun thing in gaming, we must understand there is a varying player preference out there and we must hope that developers find the right balance whilst also not over catering to one crowd or the other. I hope you all enjoyed this video as it was something different, and if you did, please let me know by liking the video. I'll be scanning every one of your glorious comments below, so please comment your thoughts on PvP MMOs, or PvP in MMOs rather. Thank you so much to our YouTube channel members, our Twitch subs, and Patreon members. Links to show support will be down in the description. Thank you so much for watching. It's been nice.
So yeah, ultimately, the biggest issue with MMO PvP is a lack of fundamental control over how it plays out, as it were. If I go into a MMO like New World, right? I hit level 15, and then all of a sudden I have a max level character coming in and killing me repeatedly, taking all my stuff. One, even if I'm motivated to continue playing because I want to get revenge and kill that player, I want to get to max level, I'm not going to be able to do that because he's there. And I fundamentally have no chance of beating him until I get to that level and get that gear. And because he is already there and already has that gear, he can ensure I never reach that point. It's just the long and short of it. RuneScape, before they removed PvP in their wilderness for some stupid reason ages ago, the way their wilderness worked is the deeper you got into it, the higher the level range of people that could attack you. So at the very start of it, it was like anyone within like 3 combat levels of you could attack you. All the way up to the very edge of the wilderness, the very outskirts of the wilderness, where it was something like anyone within like a 60 level range of you could attack you, right? And pures, that is people who trained only one specific or maybe 2 specific stats, would retain a very, very low level and thus would be able to kill a rather wide number of players from both low level to very high level players that you wouldn't necessarily expect to be able to, and it was because of how they built their character, right? Ultimately, they removed their wilderness, put in the bounty hunter, that flopped, and then that died, and now PvP in RuneScape is all but dead. And you could see this the moment they removed wilderness PvP, an enormous amount of their player base just stopped playing. There were an enormous amount of clans that just instantly folded and closed as a result of PvP being removed. In a game like Ashes of Creation or New World, where you lose not just experience but items when you die, or at least I believe you lose items in Ashes of Creation when you die in PvP, it's even more frustrating because you did lose a lot of your items even in RuneScape, but in RuneScape it was somewhat different because if you did not have a skull, your 3 most valuable items were kept. Whereas if you're a skull, you dropped absolutely everything unless you use the prayer protect item, which lets you keep 1 additional item. If you're a skull, you'd keep only 1 item. But the difference is in RuneScape, it is much, much easier to recover from losing a number of items than it is in most other games. In most other games, you have to go out, farm all the material, and then try and recraft it, essentially. And there's no easy way to trade with players like there is in, say, RuneScape now, where in RuneScape, you can just go to one of the many trading worlds, find someone selling the item relatively quickly, or post on the forums, and within a relatively short amount of time, get those items back for a modest sum. Now, I'm not entirely sure how it works in Ashes of Creation or New World, but I don't imagine it is all that easy to get those items back, right? I'm sure, especially if you're a part of like a guild or something, you might have dedicated crafters who spend their time out crafting, getting their materials and everything, and making spares. But if you are a solo player, you have to then try and go out, unless you have backup copies of those gears, you have to go out and try and farm those materials again in a world that wants to stop you from doing just that, right? And typically speaking, in hardcore MMOs, they are not solo player friendly. And I think that right there is the key reason why PvP focused MMOs generally don't succeed, is they are not solo player friendly. They are big group friendly. And unless you know very specific and very niche tactics, it is very difficult to get players to be willing to participate in these kind of environments and in these kind of games. So that's why in like World of Warcraft, for example, or Final Fantasy 14, where you don't lose things when you die, the frustration that players feel for PvP is significantly lower than the frustration that they feel in games like Ashes of Creation or New World, where you lose XP and items when you die. So that's it for this. This has been a 40+ minute video for a 13-minute video, but that is the nature of my channel, where I make exceedingly long videos for absolutely no reason. Thank you all for joining. If you liked the video, hit like and subscribe. If you didn't, hit this like, let me know why you think or what you think the problem with MMO PvP, if you even think there is a problem with MMO PvP, down in the comments. And I will see you all next time.